This is Dolany TV, guys. Today, well, of course, I'm still on kind of mini vacation right now, but vacation mode can wait for a few seconds as we have some news on Roberto Osuna regarding the Toronto Blue Jays trading him to Houston in exchange for 3 players. A major deal for the Blue Jays, of course, now becomes the question, is it a good trade for the Blue Jays? We'll break all that down in a few seconds, but first we have to get through the real tough deal with Roberto Osuna. Of course, the other question, we'll talk about the Houston return, like I said. But in terms of Roberto Osuna, what you have is a player who's currently suspended until August 5th. If any new evidence is presented before then, he could potentially be held out longer by Major League Baseball, depending on their determination of how good that evidence is in the case of Roberto Osuna. So that's a tough challenge, right? Houston's now giving up 3 pieces to get a guy who may or may not pitch for them. Now the question becomes, what did Houston give up? The return in exchange for Roberto Osuna is Ken Giles, that closing pitcher that we all know was a pivotal piece in Houston last year. Had a very rough season so far this year. Of course, had that one incident that really blew up social media the other week. So don't sleep that Ken Giles is the perfect return by any means for Roberto Osuna. The other players involved are David Paulino. He is a right-handed pitcher. He is heading back to the Toronto Blue Jays in this Osuna trade. Was suspended 80 games last year. This is all according to Ken Rosenthal on Twitter as well. After testing positive for a PED. Prior to that, he was Houston's number 3 prospect and number 44 overall per the MLB pipeline. Dropped to number 23 on Houston's list this season. So number 3 to 23, that's a drastic drop within the system in 1 year. But the question is, how much of the PED performance did affect that, right? It's the same thing with the Osuna and Ken Giles situations. Attitude, an off-field issue. I don't even want to try and dabble in that with the Osuna thing too much. And then, of course, PED use. You have a triple-headed monster in this trade. It's an absolute mess, but that is the kind of situation you deal with when you are dealing guys who are not exactly the best, well-rounded people off the field when it comes to being a ball player. So the other player involved in the Osuna deal is Hector Perez. He was the Astros' number 10 prospect per the MLB pipeline. So it's Giles, Perez, Paulino for Osuna. And here's the interesting fact, as pointed out by Ken Rosenthal on Twitter, both Giles and Osuna are under club control through 2020. So 2 guys that are very controllable for next season and the season after. So that's a big benefit for both clubs. The question is, how well do they perform this year? Realistically, Giles, I don't even know why the Blue Jays would want a guy like this. Yes, you got to replace a closer with a closer, sure, fine and dandy. But the question is, like, this guy is clearly on the decline this year. And at the same rate, attitude issues on the field, attitude issues off the field. And come on now, you just traded away Roberto Osuna. Yeah, off-field issues aside, the tremendous talent that kid is. A little bit more return would be good, but now, of course, you've got the prospects in return. Now add on the layer of the complications of the PED use of the one player, David Paulino, and all of a sudden you've got an absolute mess of a trade return and everything. But now the question becomes, these 2 young kids, let's go research them a little bit and get into what these guys are all about. That's kind of what I like to do, is I like to break things down as best I can for you. So let's get David Paulino up there and see what I can find for you in terms of baseball reference stats. David Paulino in the Houston Astros system no longer, as he now goes to the Toronto Blue Jays. He was in the Gulf League there for a little bit and then went up to the PCL. In the PCL, he had 5.50 ERA in 4 games and 4 games started. So he did start 4 games. So he's a starter. That's good news for the Blue Jays. Somebody who is a controllable 24-year-old starter. Okay, that's not a bad situation. But here's the thing. In the Gulf Coast League, he was 3.0 ERA with 3 games started, a 9.0 innings pitched, right? 7 hits, 3 earned runs, 5 runs against, 10 strikeouts, so he's more than a Ks per 9. So this guy could be something good, but I mean, 5 games in the PCL and only 3 games in the Gulf Coast League. Of course, probably a little bit of the suspension hung over into this season, so keep that in mind. That is your book on David Paulino at this point, a starting pitcher, 24 years old for the Toronto Blue Jays now. So David Paulino, book's closed on him for this video. Let's go get ourselves in with the Perez kid, Hector Perez, who is the 10th rated prospect in the system for the Houston Astros. All right, Hector Perez, Baseball Reference. What do we got in Hector Perez? He's a pitcher, 22 years old, 54 days into his 22nd year around the sun. June 6, 1996, rather close to myself. So this kid, he's got a chance, man. Let's go see what we've got. A+ and AA ball. So in AA or A+ ball, didn't get the book on him. He is just a pitcher, so looks like he's a reliever overall. 17 games played in the A+ league. 11 games started. Okay, so he can start. He might not start. You know what I mean? And an ERA of 3.24 in 4 games. 2 of those started in the AA league for Corpus Christi. So, okay, the return not looking as bad when you break down the prospects. Keep in mind though, Paulino did have the PED use. I'm not a big fan of PED users, but at the same time, he's a young kid, no major league impact as a PED user yet. So do you forgive, forget, move on? At least it's not the Roberto Osuna issue. It's not quite as close to the Ken Giles issue either. Maybe he's a good guy all around, just trying to boost himself. I don't know. Maybe there's more to this PED use suspension than I know even. So keep that in mind. This is absolutely reactionary. This is as much as I can find in 10-15 minutes to break down this trade for you guys and hopefully help you make sense of why the Toronto Blue Jays may or may not have screwed themselves with the Roberto Osuna deal, right? The last guy we have to check, and then I'll give you Roberto Osuna's stats as well if you are a Houston Astros fan. I appreciate you tuning in. I'm a Blue Jays fan, if you couldn't have already tell. So let's go get into the Ken Giles stats right here. He has played, well, total of 5 major league seasons. 0-2 this season, a 4.99 ERA, 34 games, 12 saves, 30 innings pitched, 36 hits against, 17 earned runs, 2 homers, only 3 walks. Keep that in mind, boys. That is a wicked walk to innings pitched ratio. That is huge. That helps out his whip. Yes, sure, he's given up 6 more hits than innings pitched, 5, 6, whatever you want to call me on. 1.27 whip because of those 3 walks. That is absolutely massive. Somehow his ERA is still 4.99, probably because of the hits, and that is fair. But you can see he's kind of falling off that cliff of dominance he was last year. 63 games, and man, oh man, 250 ERA or 230 ERA. That's huge. And seasons prior to that, he was a 118 in his rookie season in 23 in 2014. Then when he was 24 in 2015, well, he was pretty good as well. A 180 ERA. His worst season was in Houston his first year, 4.11 ERA. Keep that in mind. So Houston has not been kind to Ken Giles. We'll get over to the Roberto Osuna side, and then I'll tell you my real feelings if you haven't seen them already, because I think I've made it pretty clear as to what I'm thinking on this trade, that is for sure. Roberto Osuna, there's way too many news. I need Baseball Reference here, my man. And Google's not going to give it to me, so let's go Baseball Reference, and I'll give you the book on Roberto Osuna, and we will get up on out of here. So the 23-year-old, halfway through his 23-year-old season, 20 years old when he broke in with the Toronto Blue Jays, has mastered everything so far. The worst ERA season was last year. A 22-year-old Roberto Osuna gave up a 3.38 ERA in 58 games, or in 66 games, pardon me, which was actually his career low. This year is career low, obviously, because of the suspension. 15 games. He has had 9 saves, 15 innings pitched, 15 in the third, 16 hits, 5 earned runs, 1 walk, 13 strikeouts. So he wasn't even quite the Roberto Osuna we know beforehand. Like, this season has been a wash for Roberto Osuna on the field so far, and you want to talk about off the field, absolute disaster. So right there, I'm going to give you this right down as simple as I can make it. Roberto Osuna for Ken Giles, Paulino, and Perez. We're going to see, because Osuna's still a mess. We don't know anything until August 5th. Heck, we could know stuff maybe August 2nd, 3rd, 4th, but we won't absolutely know until the 5th. And Ken Giles, it's a losing season anyway. What do we need another reliever for? Well, sure, up the bullpen, actually have some major leaguers up in there for sure. But these minor leaguers, they're going to help maybe next year, the year after. The window to win is next year, the year after that. 3 years, I'd give Vladdy Guerrero Jr. and Bo Bichette to be Impact World Series players. Yes, they're young. Maybe that's way unrealistic. But if you're surrounding them with this core talent this early on, before Guerrero Jr. or Bichette has made the major leagues, you're talking the window to win is getting closer and closer and closer by the day. Anyway, guys, I'm Tyson. This is Dolany TV. I'm really fired up over this. I'm going to leave you guys alone. I will catch you guys, as always, in the next one.